There are many interesting periods of history, but nothing captures people's imaginations like the times of empires. The word empire simply just captivates anyone who hears it and adds sort of a mythical feeling to it. Everyone remembers the great stories of the Roman Empire, the Mongol Empire, and the British Empire. Now, this video will do a top 5 of the greatest empires. Now, what do I mean by greatest? Do I mean the largest? Well, no. Do I mean the one that lasted the longest? Well, no, not necessarily. More than anything, its greatness is just going to be measured by its memorability, how people still remember it today and still study it, still learn about it, and also a little bit of just personal likes and cares for people who study history and just who really know about empires of which they most like to study. So let's just get right into the top 5, which coming in at number 1, we're going to say the Roman Empire. Now, that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. The Roman Empire is probably the most well known empire in the world. Anyone says an empire, many's thoughts immediately goes to the Roman Empire. But it didn't always start out that way. First and foremost, it was a republic with a senate and everything. Now, the Senate still stayed around in the time of the empire, but its power was very much diminished by the emperor himself. The Roman Empire stretched as far as from Great Britain all the way over to Turkey and beyond. This was a truly massive ancient empire, and none would pass it in sheer size and splendor for many years. And it is one of, if not the longest lasting empire in history. Much of its recorded history and artwork and architecture still live on today that we can still go and see and study and learn about. Its history is fascinating, as is its characters that made that history. Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, Mark Antony, just to name a few. The wars that they waged still hold sway today. And some of the things that they taught and that they studied are things still taught and studied today. Truly, no empire is as well remembered or cherished in history as the Roman Empire. We'll go on to number 2, where we have the French Empire, more specifically the French Empire in the 1800s under Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, why this French Empire certainly wasn't the longest lasting, nor nowhere near the largest. That is true. This empire was made great by Napoleon Bonaparte, but that doesn't mean that this empire was not great to begin with. First and foremost, it had been devastated previously by the reign of terror during the French Revolution. For it to come out of the ashes and able to conquer pretty much all of Europe is truly impressive. They also, in their time, managed to defeat almost every major power that was thrown against it. Once again, this was largely due to Napoleon Bonaparte. But that doesn't mean that this French Empire doesn't deserve some recognition on the world stage. If it wasn't for Napoleon, would the French Empire have ever really grown to such an extent? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that it's any less fascinating period of history, nor less impressive and great an empire. Number 3, we're going to have the Russian Empire. And I'm not talking about like the Warsaw Pact, Russia, and it's kind of empire, yet not official empire. No, I'm talking about the actual Russian Empire. Now, many people don't really focus on the Russian Empire or even forget that it ever was called an empire. But the Russian Empire didn't fall until after World War I, when it was overthrown by a provincial government and then by the Bolsheviks. who would later transform it into the Soviet Union. But before this time, most people just focus on the Romanov dynasty of when they ruled the Russian Empire, which is 300 years of Russian ruling history. But you go back even before that, before it was even an empire, and you find a rich, fascinating culture and history that is often sadly overlooked. This empire has brought about some of the greatest changes and effects in Europe that can still be seen today and definitely deserves much more attention. I always find myself captivated and learning something new about their history, their amazing culture, their amazing religion that they have, where they kind of separated from the typical Christian Catholic organization and created their own. Everything about the Russian Empire and just even Russia as a whole is a truly fascinating thing to study. So, for anyone looking to study up on their empires, I highly recommend you go back and take another look at the Russian Empire. Now, number four, we're going to have the Egyptian Empire. Now, definitely in this case, you can clearly tell this was never a massive empire, nor one that had such grand, effects on the world stage as any of these other empires. However, I would be completely remiss to have never ever mentioned this empire. No, everyone loves ancient Egypt, the mummies, the pyramids, just everything that they are has captivated us for centuries. Every time a new tomb of the pharaohs is discovered, it is major headlines in the news and captivates people, millions of people, for such a long time. Nothing else in the other empires ever does that. You have someone find a new artifact from the Roman Empire, hardly anyone cares. You find something new from the French Empire, hardly anyone cares, or the Russian. But if you find something new from ancient Egypt, you can have millions of people who otherwise don't care about history suddenly so interested and so captivated by what they could have just discovered. The stories of ancient Egypt, its mythology that it has, its architecture, to say the least, is immensely impressive. And it is just something that captivates people no matter what. You see a new museum exhibit on mummies and ancient Egypt, you have thousands of people flocking to that museum to get a glimpse of them before that they are taken away. Ancient Egypt is one of the most well loved and well remembered empires that ever existed, and it is one that deserves to be on every top five list. My last one on the top five greatest empires would be the British Empire. Now, despite also having some personal opinions on these empires, I cannot make a list without mentioning the British Empire. Empire on which the sun never sets. This empire was truly massive and mind blowing. No one could guess that this little island nation, once controlled by the Roman Empire, and then slowly throughout history grew and grew until it became a world superpower, conquering India, part of the Americas, and waging war on a grand scale across the globe. This empire is remembered for its British redcoats, for its large size and great navy. And it's one that is easy to remember for its history only ended somewhat much more recently than these other empires. And it is one that is taught throughout history no matter what, because it was there in World War One and in World War Two. They had soldiers from their colonial empires still around. So this empire only completely collapsed just some decades ago. For one of the longest lasting and largest empires to ever have existed, we end this top five list with the Great British Empire. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, please leave a like and comment down below. I would like to set a goal for 10 likes on this video for this empire. Now, I've never gotten 10 likes on a video. I know, probably kind of sad, but I believe that it can be done. So all you lovers of history out there, please do me this solid. Let's leave 10 likes on the video and don't forget to also subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video.